I stepped out of the rideshare and craned my neck. Aspen Ridge Hall wasn't just a mansion. It was a sprawling monument to wealth, glowing against the deep purple of the Nightingale Vineyard sky. It looked like it had been carved from ivory and moonlight. My olive green gown, the one I'd saved for 3 months to buy, suddenly felt like a paper costume. I smoothed the silk, my palms clammy. This was a world I visited, not one I belonged to. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see crystal chandeliers that looked like captured supernovas. Outside, champagne fountains caught the last golden rays of sunset, and a string quartet played something complicated and classical that drifted across the impossibly green grounds. My sister, Serafina, had spent $240,000 on her perfect wedding. It was a staggering sum, but it paled in comparison to the $0 she'd spent in her entire life trying to hide how much she despised me. I pulled out my compact, clicking it open to check my lipstick. It was a stalling tactic, one last moment of reprieve before I had to walk into the lion's den. The reflection in the small mirror showed the face I had practiced for weeks, composed, professional, unbothered. It was the mask I'd perfected through 2 decades of Serafina's little digs, quiet manipulations, and spectacular betrayals. Amelia, you finally made it. I snapped the compact shut. Serafina glided toward me, a vision in white silk and a perfume that probably cost more than my rent. Her smile was brilliant, blinding, but it didn't come anywhere near her cold, assessing eyes. At 29, my little sister had mastered the art of the public performance. "Everyone," she announced, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry to a nearby cluster of guests sipping champagne. "This is my sister, Amelia." She paused, letting the silence hang, before delivering the punch. "My forever single sister." The guests tittered politely. One older woman, draped in diamonds, gave me a sympathetic little smile that made my stomach clench. "Amy? Is that what we're calling it?" I tried for breezy, but my voice was tight. "She's always been so career-focused," Serafina stage whispered, a whisper designed to be heard within a 15-foot radius. "Some women just aren't meant for love, I suppose." I swallowed the acid retort that clawed its way up my throat. I forced my own smile, the practiced one. "Congratulations, Serafina. Everything looks beautiful." If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. A hostess with a clipboard and a pained expression found my name. Amelia Donovan. Right this way. She didn't lead me toward the glittering tables near the dance floor, where I could see our cousins and aunts. She led me to the back, to the darkest corner of the sprawling reception hall. She gestured to table 14. It was tucked directly beside the swinging double doors of the kitchen, a high-traffic area where servers rushed in and out, their trays laden with hors d'oeuvres. I sat down, and my chair was immediately bumped by a waiter flying through the doors. "Pardon me, ma'am." "No problem," I muttered, steadying my water glass. I surveyed my table mates. 3 other singles, all looking as profoundly uncomfortable as I felt, and Great Aunt Matilda. Her hearing aid was whistling a high-pitched, intermittent squeal. "Amelia!" she shouted, her voice carrying across the adjacent tables. "Still being too picky about men, are we? Tick-tock, dear, tick-tock." I picked up my half-empty wine glass and took a long, slow sip instead of answering. Across the room, Serafina held court at the head table, radiant and laughing, her designer gown shimmering. Our father, Conrad, sat beside her, beaming. I tried to catch his eye, but he suddenly found his napkin intensely interesting, avoiding my gaze. My mother, Miriam, gave me a quick, apologetic glance before turning away, her shoulders hiked in a familiar gesture of spinelessness. A server bumped my chair again, harder this time, sloshing wine over the rim of my glass. I steadied it, my knuckles white. I thought about the teenage Serafina, the one who stole my prom date, Julian Myers. He was the quarterback with kind eyes, and she decided she wanted him. Our parents had said, "Let her have this one, Amelia. You know how she gets." I did. I knew exactly how she got. She got everything. She got everything she wanted, while I was expected to be the reasonable one, the one who stepped aside, the one who kept the peace. Dinner was served. The kitchen doors swung relentlessly. Bump. Excuse me. Bump. So sorry. Bump. Finally, Serafina tapped her crystal glass with a spoon, the sound silencing the room. She stood, a vision of bridal perfection, and raised her glass. Her speech was a masterpiece of passive aggression, a series of thinly veiled barbs wrapped in the gauzy packaging of sisterly affection. "To my big sister, Amelia," she said, raising her glass directly at me. The spotlight that had been on the dance floor suddenly swung and found me at my dark, vibrating table. "She's always been my role model." I tensed, knowing what was coming. "Amelia is so married to her career," Serafina continued, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "She forgot to find a husband." Laughter rippled through the crowd. It wasn't kind laughter. It was the laughter of people relieved the joke wasn't on them. I maintained my smile, my cheeks aching from the effort, the spotlight burning my eyes. A woman at the next table whispered to her companion, just loud enough for me to hear over the din. Poor thing. She's not getting any younger. Later, as guests mingled during a cocktail break, I was standing alone by the bar, nursing a champagne I couldn't taste. Pierce Hamilton, the groom, investment banker, and tennis player, spotted me. He was, at his core, a decent man who was simply blinded by my sister. "Amelia, come over, meet the family." He waved me over to a cluster of older, terrifyingly wealthy-looking relatives. "This is Amelia, Serafina's sister," he said, putting a friendly hand on my back. "She runs all the marketing for that big tech firm in Savannah, TerraCore." Before I could even say hello or elaborate, Serafina materialized, slipping her arm possessively through Pierce's. Her smile was sharp. "This is my sister," she announced to his relatives, cutting him off. "The family spinster." The crowd's reaction was a mix of uncomfortable chuckles and outright pity. An older woman with a helmet of silver hair patted my hand. "You still have time, dear," she assured me. "Have you considered freezing your eggs? My niece did it last year. Such a sensible option." "Or dating apps," another chimed in. "My son met a lovely girl." "And that color, dear," a third woman said, eyeing my gown. "Olive green. Have you tried wearing more feminine colors? A nice rose, perhaps?" I nodded. I smiled. I endured. It was the role I'd been trained to play, the one that was always expected of me. "All right, family photo time," the photographer called out, clapping his hands. "Immediate family only, please, bride and groom in the center." I started to step forward, moving toward my parents. The photographer, a young, stressed-out man, saw me and held up a hand. "Oh, sorry, just immediate family for this one." He physically gestured for me to step aside, to move back with the other guests. I froze. I looked at Serafina, who gave me a tiny, triumphant shrug, as if to say, "What can you do?" I watched as my parents, Conrad and Miriam, flanked Serafina and Pierce. They were beaming with pride, their faces glowing for the camera, while I stood awkwardly off to the side, nursing my flat champagne, invisible. I couldn't breathe. I turned and walked quickly, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and retreated to the cavernous, opulent bathroom. I locked myself in a stall, pressing my forehead against the cool, veined marble wall. I closed my eyes and just tried to find my center. My phone screen glowed, 8:30 p.m. The reception was scheduled to go until midnight, 4.5 more hours of this. I slid off my heels, the cold tile a shock against my bare feet. For a moment, I seriously considered it. I could slip out, call an Uber back to my hotel, and text Serafina some excuse about a sudden, blinding migraine. It would be so easy. It would be an act of self-preservation. 4 more hours of this calculated public humiliation felt unsurvivable, but that's what she wanted. That's what she expected. She would tell everyone I'd flounced off in a jealous fit. I took a deep breath. I slipped my heels back on, the pain grounding me. I straightened my shoulders and unlocked the stall door. 1 more hour, I promised myself, looking at the composed mask in the mirror. Then I'm gone. I was heading for the restroom again an hour later when I heard Serafina's laughter. It was bright and brittle, coming from a small, curtained alcove off the main reception hall. The sound stopped me in my tracks. "Can you believe that dress?" My sister's voice carried, despite her attempt at a whisper. "She thinks olive is her color. It makes her look like a sad, wilting plant." A chorus of bridesmaids' titters followed. It was a sound of agreement I'd heard my entire life. "Oh, just wait," Serafina continued, her voice giddy with malice. "Wait until you see what I'm planning for the bouquet toss." "What?" one of them asked. "I'm going to aim it right at her. Then I'm having the DJ announce that she's definitely next. As if. Can you imagine?" My cheeks burned. I pressed myself against the wall, invisible in the hallway shadow, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You're evil," one bridesmaid said, but her tone was pure admiration. "I know," Serafina said, full of pride. "I made sure none of the cousins who actually like her are sitting anywhere near her. Did you see her at that reject table? Priceless." The wound deepened. I felt sick. Just then, the wedding planner, a harried-looking woman with a clipboard, hurried past. Her name tag read Josephine. I stepped out of the shadow and grabbed her arm, perhaps a little too firmly. "Excuse me," I whispered, my voice hoarse. Josephine jumped, startled. "Yes?" Was there a change to the seating arrangements? For me, Amelia Donovan? The planner's eyes darted around nervously. She looked exhausted and angry. "Look, I'm not supposed to say anything." "Please," I said. "I just need to know." She sighed, her professional mask slipping. She pulled a discarded place card from a folder in her portfolio. It was thick, expensive cardstock, with Amelia Donovan, Table 3R written in elegant, swirling calligraphy. Table 3. With my parents. With the family. "The bride requested several last-minute changes this morning," Josephine explained, her voice tight with disapproval. "She was very specific." I released her arm. "Thank you." She just nodded, sympathy softening her expression, and then she hurried away. I stood there, paralyzed by the cold, hard proof. I spotted my mother across the room, laughing at something Pierce's father said. She caught my eye, her smile faltering for a split second before she deliberately turned away. Around me, relatives who had known me since birth suddenly found their champagne glasses fascinating whenever I approached. Serafina hadn't just changed a seating card. She was conducting a symphony of rejection, and everyone was playing their part. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Josephine, the planner. Her face was pale and set. "Meet me by the service entrance." 2 minutes, she whispered, not making eye contact, and then she was gone. My heart pounded. What now? I slipped through the crowd, past the bar, and pushed open the door she'd indicated. It led to a cold concrete hallway that smelled of bleach and cooking oil. Josephine was there, pacing. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I could lose my business. But I have never, in 150 weddings, been treated the way she treated me." "The way she's treating you? What are you talking about?" "She's been a nightmare," Josephine spat, yelling at my staff, demanding refunds for things that were perfect. But that's not the worst of it. Josephine looked over her shoulder, ensuring we were alone. "She's not just cruel, Amelia. She's a fraud." I blinked. "A fraud? What do you mean?" "She's been skimming," Josephine said, her voice low and furious. "She told Pierce's family the florals were $20,000. I have the invoice. They were $12,000. She's been pocketing the difference on half the vendors. The cake, the string quartet, even the damn ice sculpture." My mind reeled. She's stealing from her new husband? And from his family, Who paid for this? And when I confronted her about a billing discrepancy, she threatened to ruin me, to tell everyone I'd botched her wedding. She said no one would believe me over her. Josephine's hands were trembling. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a small black USB drive. "It's all here," she said, pressing it into my hand. "The real invoices versus the fakes she created to give to the Hamiltons. Copies of her emails to me. Everything." The small piece of plastic felt as heavy as a bomb. "I'm not going down for her," Josephine said, her eyes flashing. "I was just going to send this to the Hamiltons anonymously next week, but after what I saw tonight, you deserve to be the one to decide what to do with it." She gave me a hard, long look. "Do what you want with it. Good luck." She turned and vanished back into the reception hall, leaving me alone in the cold hallway clutching the evidence. I needed air. I slipped through a set of French doors leading out into the garden, my mind racing. Fraud. She was committing actual fraud. I breathed in the night air, thick with the scent of roses and damp earth. My feet hurt. My face ached from the fake smile. I kicked off my heels, ready to walk barefoot to the parking lot, when something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about me being the spinster. This was a crime. I had her. I could destroy her. The thought arrived with a startling, cold clarity. Every cruel comment, every humiliation. They weren't signs of her power. They were the desperate flailings of a weak, insecure person. For the first time tonight, I didn't feel hurt. I felt pity. And then, cold anger. I was sliding my feet back into my shoes when a deep voice startled me from the shadows. "Act like you're with me. Go!" I gasped, clutching my purse. A man stepped from the shadows of a nearby trellis. Moonlight revealed a face I didn't recognize. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his tailored suit impressively. Dark hair, slightly ruffled. "Excuse me?" "Beckett Wells," he said, extending a hand. "Pierce's cousin from Baltimore." His grip was firm and warm. "And you're Amelia, the sister being systematically humiliated by the bride." His bluntness knocked me off balance. I don't know what you're talking about." "I was having a smoke behind the rose garden," he said, his expression hardening. "I overheard your sister talking to some of her bridesmaids. She was describing in detail how she's been isolating you all evening." He paused. "It was calculated." "And you're telling me this because no one should be treated that way," he said simply, "especially by family." Something in his directness disarmed me, but pride made me lift my chin. "I don't need rescuing." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "It's not rescue, it's justice. Big difference." Beckett studied me for a moment. "Look, I'm not suggesting we storm the castle or make a scene. Just walk back in with me. Let people see you're not alone. Let them see you're not defeated. Small victories." I considered his offer. The USB drive felt hot in my purse. Walking away would be easier. But the thought of Serafina's smug satisfaction when she realized I'd fled made something stubborn flare in my chest. "One condition," I said, meeting his gaze. "Name it. Don't tell me how sorry you feel for me. I've had enough pity for one night." "Wouldn't dream of it," he said. The respect in his eyes felt unfamiliar but welcome. "Ready?" He offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, I took it. His hand came to rest respectfully at the small of my back as we approached the doors, the warmth of his palm steadying me through the thin fabric of my dress. We entered together. The shift in the room was subtle, but immediate. Heads turned. Conversations paused. I saw Serafina holding court near the towering wedding cake, falter mid-sentence when she spotted us. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't recognize him, but she recognized me, and she recognized that I was not alone. The cost of this moment hit me as we moved through the crowd. I was trusting a complete stranger. I was playing a game I never wanted to join, but the confused expressions, the subtle recalculation happening behind the eyes of guests who had pitied me moments before, there was a small victory in that. As Beckett guided me toward the bar, his presence solid beside me, I felt the first ripple of a changing perception. Maybe that was enough for now. His hand rested at the small of my back. As we navigated back toward my awful table, I felt the gentle pressure, solid and reassuring. "Amelia?" Serafina's voice cut through the chatter like a shard of glass. She stood before us, champagne flute pinched between her manicured fingers. "You two know each other. How interesting." Her tone suggested it was the opposite of interesting. It was accusatory. Beckett's hand remained steady against my back. "We go way back," he said, his voice as smooth as river stones. "Amelia just prefers her privacy, don't you?" He looked at me, a silent cue. I nodded. "I do." I watched my sister's face transform. The calculations were running behind her eyes, the gears grinding as she tried to recalibrate. This didn't fit her lonely spinster narrative. "Really?" Serafina tilted her head, her pearl earrings catching the light. "Funny how you've never mentioned Beckett before." She turned her brittle smile on him. "And you've never mentioned my sister." "Some connections don't need announcing," Beckett replied, pulling out my chair at table 14. As I settled, Serafina leaned closer, her perfume overpowering. "When exactly did you two meet?" Before I could answer, the DJ's voice boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, in 15 minutes we'll have a special bouquet toss for all the single ladies." He paused dramatically. "And we have a very special bachelorette tonight, especially for Amelia Donovan." A spotlight swung wildly around the room until it found me, pinning me to my chair. "Where are you, Amelia? Let's get you ready to catch that bouquet." Guests turned, some smiling, others whispering. The heat of acute embarrassment crawled up my neck. This was her plan, the one I'd overheard. Serafina straightened, her face a mask of triumphant glee, and floated away toward Pierce. My mother, Miriam, appeared at my elbow, a ghost in a silk dress the color of weak tea. "Don't make a scene, dear," she whispered, her hand fluttering on my shoulder. "It's her special day. Just play along." After 33 years, I knew the script by heart. Swallow the humiliation. Keep the peace. Be reasonable. "I won't, Mom," I said, not looking up from my plate. She squeezed my shoulder, a weak, useless gesture, and disappeared back to the safety of the family table. "Your mother seems concerned," Beckett observed, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "She's always concerned about the wrong things," I replied, surprising myself with the candor. Beckett leaned closer, creating a small bubble of privacy amidst the noise. "Tell me about your work in Savannah. Marketing strategy at TerraCore, right? Pierce mentioned it." The question felt like a lifeline. Yes. Digital campaigns, brand positioning. "Market segmentation," he said, his eyes sharp and intelligent. "How are you handling the new privacy rollouts? Is it affecting your data models?" For the next 10 minutes, we talked. We talked about work, about difficult clients, about analytics. He didn't just nod along. He asked intelligent, probing questions. The conversation flowed effortlessly, without the awkward, painful pauses that usually plagued my interactions with new men. "That analytics approach is brilliant," he said after I described a particularly successful campaign. "Most firms in my world are still using outdated metrics from 5 years ago." A woman in her 60s, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo, stopped by our table. "Beckett, darling, you're not going to introduce me to your friend?" "Mrs. Harrington," Beckett said, standing immediately. "This is Amelia Donovan. Amelia Eleanor Harrington sits on the board of the Whitlock Foundation with my father." I extended my hand, but Mrs. Harrington ignored it and pulled me into a light, papery embrace. "Any friend of Beckett's is a friend of mine," she said, her eyes twinkling with genuine warmth. "How long have you two known each other?" The question hung between us, a test. Beckett and I reconnected recently, I said, the words coming more easily than I expected. It was unexpected, but perfectly timed. Mrs. Harrington patted my arm. The best things usually are, my dear. As she moved away, 2 more of Pierce's relatives approached, then a college friend of Beckett's. With each introduction, I felt my confidence growing. The story of our reconnection became more natural with each telling. We'd met at a conference in Charleston. We'd kept in touch. Guests who had earlier avoided eye contact, the same ones who'd offered me pity, now sought me out. Beckett's hand would occasionally brush mine. Nothing inappropriate, just enough to signal a quiet unity. I realized with a startling clarity I could rewrite this narrative. I didn't need Serafina's permission. "Time for the bouquet toss, ladies," the DJ's voice interrupted again. "All single women to the dance floor. Amelia, we're waiting for you." The spotlight found me again, more deliberately this time. Conversations paused. Everyone watched, waiting to see if I would participate in this ritual of public scrutiny. I rose slowly, smoothing my olive dress. Beckett's eyes met mine, a silent question. "I'll be fine," I said, though we both knew it was a lie. The dance floor cleared, except for a semicircle of giggling women in their early 20s. I stood slightly apart, acutely aware of the contrast. Serafina took her position, back turned to us, bouquet of white roses raised high. "Ready, ladies?" the DJ called. 1, 2... On 3, Serafina spun around. Her eyes locked on mine. The sweet bridal smile on her face turned predatory. She drew her arm back and with a vicious, overhand motion, threw the bouquet. It didn't arc gently toward the group. It flew like a missile, a line drive, directly at my face. I flinched, bracing for impact. Before I could react, Beckett stepped forward. With the casual, fluid grace of a former athlete, he reached up and snatched the bouquet from the air, inches from my nose. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Serafina's mouth opened in a perfect O of shock and disbelief. Beckett turned to me, a small, amused smile on his face. He offered the flowers with a small, gallant bow. "They're your favorite, aren't they?" he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Peonies and garden roses." I accepted the bouquet, my hand trembling, fighting the urge to laugh at Serafina's expression. It was a perfect, priceless mixture of fury and disbelief. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause. Someone whistled. The spotlight swung away, searching for the next moment of entertainment, the planned humiliation utterly diffused. 2 cousins from my mother's side, Veronica and Maya, suddenly appeared at our table, both smiling genuinely. "Amelia!" "We've been looking for you all night," said Veronica. "Your table is so far from everyone." "Not anymore," said Maya, sliding into an empty chair beside me. "Tell us about Savannah. Is it true you're running the whole digital division at TerraCore now?" As we chatted, I noticed Pierce's grandmother, a formidable woman in her 80s with a reputation for bluntness, making her way toward us. She settled her substantial frame into a chair across from me. "So," she stated, adjusting her hearing aid, "you're Conrad's older girl. About time someone in this family showed some sense." Josephine, the wedding planner, hurried over, looking flustered but with a small, satisfied glint in her eye. "Miss Donovan," she whispered, "I do apologize for the earlier confusion. I've moved your place card to table 3 for dessert, with your parents." She glanced around nervously. "The original seating chart had you there all along. Such a terrible mistake." "Thank you, Josephine," I said, meeting her gaze. We both knew it was no mistake. Beckett rose to greet 2 men in expensive, tailored suits. "Amelia," he said, "these are my colleagues from Whitlock Capital. They've been interested in expanding their marketing reach in the Pacific Northwest and Savannah." He turned to them, and I heard the unexpected pride in his voice. "Amelia is a brilliant strategist. Her campaign for TerraCore increased their market share by 22% last quarter alone." The men looked suitably impressed. One handed me his card. "We should talk," he said. For the first time since arriving at Aspen Ridge Hall, a genuine smile formed on my lips. I wasn't actually alone here. I never was. The orchestra began playing a slow song. Beckett extended his hand. "May I?" On the dance floor, his lead was confident but unassuming. We moved well together, as if we'd done this before. I glimpsed Serafina watching from the edge of the floor, her expression darkening as she watched several of Pierce's relatives nod approvingly in our direction. Halfway through the song, she cut in. Her white dress billowed as she stepped directly between us, physically pushing me back. "Mind if I borrow your date?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. She didn't wait for an answer before placing her hand on Beckett's shoulder. Beckett didn't move. He simply stepped back, creating a foot of space between them. His voice was calm, but it carried just enough to reach the nearby dancers. "You've spent the entire evening embarrassing your sister, Serafina. Maybe you should let her enjoy this one dance." The music seemed to dip. Gasps rose from the couples around us. Pierce hurried over, his face flushed beneath his carefully groomed beard. "Serafina, honey, your father wants to speak with you," he said, taking her elbow. "In a minute," she hissed. "Now, Serafina," he said, his voice firm, her face contorted with frustration. She opened her mouth to object, then seemed to remember where she was. With visible, painful effort, she composed her features into a brittle smile and allowed Pierce to lead her away. I remained standing tall, my breathing steady, my expression neutral. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. The glances directed at me were no longer filled with pity. They were sympathetic, approving, and intensely curious. We returned to table 3, the mistake now corrected, and sat with my parents for dessert. Beckett and I refined our story. We'd reconnected at a marketing conference in Charleston last month. It was new but promising. My mother looked relieved. My father looked confused. I reached into my small clutch purse to grab my compact mirror, wanting to check if my smile was as steady as it felt. My fingers brushed against my lipstick, my keys, my phone, but not the USB drive. My blood went cold. I dug deeper, my heart starting to hammer. It wasn't there. "What is it?" Beckett murmured, noticing my expression. "It's gone," I whispered, frantically dumping the contents of my purse onto my lap, hidden by the tablecloth. "The thing. The gift from the planner. It's gone." I must have dropped it. Maybe in the garden? Maybe on the dance floor? I looked up, scanning the room in a panic, and then I saw her. Across the room, standing near a server station, was Serafina. She was watching me. Her eyes were cold and victorious. As I watched, frozen, she slowly raised her hand. She held the small black USB drive pinched between her thumb and forefinger. She held my gaze, a slow, cruel smile spreading across her face. Then, with deliberate, theatrical slowness, she dropped the drive into a tall silver bucket filled with ice and water, meant for chilling champagne. She watched it sink. The evidence was gone. I felt the blood drain from my face. She knew. She had found it, or perhaps seen me take it. She had won. No. I looked at her and she was still smiling. No, I wouldn't need it. I wouldn't sink to her level. I would win this on my own terms. I took a slow, steadying breath. "All right, gentlemen," the DJ's voice boomed, shattering the moment. "It's time for the garter toss. All single men to the dance floor. Let's see who's next." Beckett squeezed my hand under the table. "I believe that's my cue," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Are you okay?" I nodded, my resolve hardening like steel. "Perfectly." He joined the small, rowdy cluster of unmarried men. Preston sat on a chair in the center of the dance floor, and Serafina perched on his lap, giggling as he reached beneath the mountain of her dress for the garter. The men jockeyed for position. Beckett stood slightly apart, tall and composed, not engaging in the shoving. Preston flung the garter. It was a high, wobbly arc. Beckett didn't lunge or jump. He simply stepped forward, arm outstretched, and caught it with deliberate, easy confidence. The crowd cheered. I knew what came next. Across the room, I saw Serafina whispering urgently to the wedding planner, who looked increasingly uncomfortable and was shaking her head. Serafina was planning another ambush. The spotlight swung toward me once again. "And now," the DJ announced, his voice giddy, "tradition calls for our garter and bouquet winners to share a special moment. Let's get them out here." The spotlight found me, standing frozen, the bouquet clutched in my hands. Across the dance floor, Beckett held the garter, his eyes finding mine with a silent question. The crowd parted between us, creating a runway of expectation. Serafina hovered at the edge of the spotlight, her smile stretched as tight as cellophane. This was it. This was the humiliation she'd been planning. The desperate spinster, forced into a mortifying sexualized ritual with a handsome stranger. She thought I would refuse, or break down, or look ridiculous. I took a breath. I straightened my shoulders, and I stepped forward. Hushed whispers rippled around me. "Go on," someone urged Beckett. He walked to the center of the floor and knelt. My heart hammered against my ribs as he looked up. His expression was serious, but his eyes were warm with reassurance. "May I?" he asked, his voice pitched just for me. I extended my legs slightly, the olive silk of my dress falling away. The room held its collective breath. Beckett didn't crawl. He didn't leer. He slid the garter only an inch above my ankle, his touch respectful and brief. He transformed what could have been mortifying into something almost elegant. He rose, offered his arm, and I took it. Together we turned to the crowd and bowed slightly, as if we'd rehearsed it. The applause that broke out wasn't uncomfortable. It was genuine, warm appreciation. Preston's aunt, dripping in pearls, caught my eye and nodded approvingly. "You handled that beautifully," Beckett murmured, his hand warm on my back as he led me from the floor. "We handled it," I corrected him, matching his quiet tone. The moment shattered. Serafina's voice cut through the music, sharp and amplified. "Attention, everyone, I'd like to make one more impromptu toast to my sister." Josephine, the planner, frowned, checking her clipboard. This was not on the schedule. Serafina grabbed a microphone from the DJ's booth, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "You know, watching Amelia catch that bouquet, it reminded me of all her past relationships." Her laugh sounded like breaking glass. The room grew uncomfortably silent. "Remember Trevor from college?" she asked, her eyes finding mine. "He broke up with her because—" "What was it, Amelia?" "Oh, right. Too intense about her career." My stomach dropped. She was doing this. "Or Michael," she continued, pacing the floor. "He couldn't handle her rigid schedules. Or Daniel, who said she was— what was it? Emotionally unavailable." She surveyed the silent, horrified crowd, enjoying their discomfort. "My sister has always been particular. But that's what makes her Amelia, right? So, to my sister, may she find someone, someday, who truly understands all her quirks." Our father, Conrad, laughed awkwardly. The sound hung in the air like smoke. My mother squeezed my hand under the table, a silent, useless apology. I felt Beckett tense beside me, ready to stand, to intervene. I placed my hand on his arm, stopping him. "This is my battle," I whispered. I stood, picking up the glass of champagne a server had just poured. The room grew quiet, all eyes on me. "Thank you, Serafina," I said. My voice came out steady, surprising even me. "Thank you for those thoughtful words." I paused, letting the silence stretch. It's true, I have had my share of relationships that didn't work out. That's how we learn. That's how we learn what we deserve and what we won't tolerate. I turned my gaze from her to the rest of the room. "So I'd like to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To Sloan and Preston. May your marriage reflect the kindness and consideration you show to others every single day." I I smiled, and the room followed, raising their glasses. Several guests exchanged knowing glances. Those who understood the double edge of my toast hid smiles behind their champagne flutes. Those who didn't simply nodded along. The message landed exactly where it mattered. Serafina's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. The color drained from her face, then rushed back in a blotchy red tide. She recovered, clutching Pierce's arm a little too tightly. Later, Beckett guided me around the dance floor for another song. "That was remarkable," he said, his hand resting lightly on my waist. "You didn't let her make you cruel. That takes a different kind of strength." I think I just understood something," I said, the revelation settling into my bones. My whole life, I thought the choice was between being a doormat or becoming like her. "The third option," he said, nodding. "The third option," I agreed. "Standing my ground without becoming the thing I hate." My power wasn't in making her small. It was in refusing to play her game at all. The song ended. Serafina materialized beside us, her gown rustling like angry whispers. "The photographer wants some sisters-only photos," she announced, her voice tight. She was already reaching for my arm, by the fountain, right now. I recognized the tactic instantly. Isolation. Away from the protective buffer of witnesses. Away from Beckett. "Actually, Serafina, I think we're done with photos." "It's my wedding day, Amelia," she cut me off, her voice rising. "One photo won't kill you." The guests nearby watched, no longer pretending not to listen. Serafina's desperation was becoming obvious, her composure cracking like thin ice. Pierce appeared beside her. "Honey, maybe we should greet the Andersons. They're waiting." "In a minute, Pierce," she snapped, shrugging him off. "This is important." "Serafina." The voice was quiet but cut through the tension. It was our mother. Miriam approached, her face pale but her expression set with an uncharacteristic firmness. "That's enough for tonight," she said. Serafina's eyes widened in genuine shock. Margaret Donovan had never said no to her youngest daughter. Not once. Not ever. "Mom, I just want—" "I said that's enough," Miriam repeated. And she turned, not to me, but to Pierce's mother, and started a conversation about the cake. The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. The evening's energy, which had revolved around Serafina like a planet, redirected. Two of Serafina's own college friends approached me. "Amelia, we were fascinated by what you were saying about TerraCore." Preston's mother, the formidable one, invited me to the family brunch tomorrow. 11 a.m., don't be late. Even the maid of honor, who had been one of the giggling bridesmaids in the alcove, leaned in to ask about my marketing firm. Beckett stayed close without hovering, a warm anchor. By the time he returned from getting us drinks, I was surrounded by a small group of people genuinely interested in my answers. Across the room, Serafina stood alone for the first time all evening. Her perfect makeup was smudged at the corners of her eyes. Frustration and fury seeped through the cracks of her composure. Two bridesmaids exchanged concerned glances as they watched her down an entire glass of champagne in one go. Preston took her aside, his head bent close to hers, whispering urgently. She shook her head once, twice, then nodded reluctantly. The evening was winding down. The orchestra was packing up. My parents approached me near the exit. Mom was twisting her wedding band. "Arya, she began, then stopped. "I should have said something. Sooner, not just tonight, all these years." Before I could respond, Dad appeared, rocking on his heels. "Your sister's just high-strung today," he offered, the familiar threadbare excuse falling flat. I looked past him. Serafina was walking toward me. Her face was composed again, the vulnerability practiced. "Amelia." Her voice was soft, a tone I hadn't heard since we were girls. "Let's put this behind us. Family comes first, right?" She touched my arm. "We should talk, just us sisters." before you go." The old guilt, the decades of conditioning, pushed me to agree. Dad chimed in. "Yes, honey, smooth things over. The photographer wants a few more of you girls together." "Just forgive her," Mom whispered. "You know how she gets." The familiar weight settled on my shoulders, the relatives watching, the expectation. Don't ruin Sloane's perfect night. Sloane's fingers tightened on my wrist. "Come on, we need sister pictures before Beckett whisks you away." She followed my gaze. Across the room, Preston's father had cornered Beckett in an intense business discussion. He glanced at me, his expression apologetic, before returning to the conversation. "Perfect timing," Serafina said, a hint of her old self returning. "Let's go while he's busy." She pulled me toward the photographer. "One more," she commanded the camera, draping her arm around my waist, her smile dazzling. "Closer this time." I felt myself slipping, disappearing, the decision crystallized. "I'm happy to take one photo, Serafina," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Then I need to find my date. But we've barely had any—" "Last dance of the evening, everyone," the DJ's announcement boomed. I turned away from her, mid-sentence. My heart hammered. The crowd shifted, couples moving toward the floor. For a moment I stood alone. Then he was there. Beckett, hand extended, appearing exactly when I needed him. "May I?" he asked. Relief washed through me. "Yes." We moved toward the dance floor. Serafina tried to follow. "Amelia, wait!" But the crowd closed around us like water. From the corner of my eye, I saw Pierce's grandmother, the formidable one, intercept my sister with a firm hand and an urgent question about the floral arrangements. Bennett's hand settled at the small of my back, warm and steady. "I saw her coming for you," he said softly as the first notes of "at last" filled the air. "Figured you might want an exit strategy." "How did you know?" His eyes crinkled at the corners. I recognized the patterns immediately. My mother was the same way with my aunt, competitive, manipulative, always needing to be the center of attention. The revelation stunned me. So this wasn't just random chance? You stepping out of the shadows? He shook his head. "I saw how she treated you from the moment you arrived. The seating, the toast, the bouquet. Classic moves of someone who builds themselves up by tearing others down." "I thought you were rescuing me," I admitted. "No." His voice dropped lower. "This was an alliance. You were already responding with such grace. All you needed was a witness, someone to acknowledge it. The rest, you did yourself." My throat tightened. All evening I'd thought he was protecting me, but he'd been partnering with me, a crucial difference. "Look around," he said. I did. The wedding videographer was capturing us. An older couple watched, the woman whispering to her partner. Preston's relatives raised their glasses in our direction. "They saw it all," Beckett continued. "The contrast, how transparent her tactics were. You didn't need that USB drive. Truth speaks through actions." The song drew to a close. Bennett escorted me toward the coat check. Serafina materialized from the crowd, her face tight with barely controlled fury. She got close, hissing low enough that only I could hear. "You turned my wedding into your personal dating opportunity." The accusation hung in the air. The old Amelia would have apologized. Instead, I met her gaze steadily. My voice was quiet, devoid of anger. "No, Serafina. You turned your wedding into a showcase of who you really are." Her face flushed a deep, ugly red. She opened her mouth to respond, but Beckett appeared at my side, my coat draped over his arm. "Ready to go, Amelia?" he asked. Serafina looked between us, her expression unreadable, and then she turned and walked away. Outside, string lights illuminated the path. Our breath formed small clouds in the cool night air. Wedding sparklers were being lit in the distance. "Was this just about surviving tonight?" Beckett asked, stopping beside my rental car. Behind us, laughter and music spilled from the venue. The night felt full of possibility, not defeat. I looked up at him, at this man who had seen me, really seen me, and hadn't offered pity. I no longer felt the need to run. "No," I said. "I don't think it was." I stood by the window of my Savannah apartment, phone pressed to my ear, watching the skyline transition from amber to indigo. "I made reservations at that waterfront place you like for tomorrow," Mom said. Her voice was tentative, a new quality I was still getting used to. "Unless you'd prefer somewhere else." "That's perfect, Mom," I answered, letting the silence breathe. "I've been talking about things. In therapy," she said, a rush of words. "About Serafina, about you. I should have protected you, Amelia. All those years." The old me would have rushed to ease her guilt. "It's okay, Mom." Instead, I watched a ferry crawl across the water. "We're finding better ways now," I said finally, and I meant it. My phone vibrated, a text from Serafina. "Just wondering if you're still upset about the wedding. You barely respond to my texts." 3 months ago, this would have triggered an anxiety-filled negotiation. I set the phone on the windowsill, screen down. I'd answer later, or not, on my terms. "Mom, I should go. Beckett's flight from Baltimore gets in at 8, I said, smiling. "He's good for you," Mom said, her voice warming. "I see how you stand taller when he's around." "It's not just him," I corrected her gently. "I stand taller because I finally decided I deserve to." After we hung up, I straightened cushions that didn't need straightening. This morning, Jasmine, a junior marketer on my team, had lingered after our meeting. "My sister," she'd confided, "she keeps undermining me to our parents. I don't know how to make her stop without blowing up the whole family." I recognized the exhaustion in her voice, the weight of being the reasonable one. "Boundaries aren't walls," I told her, the words coming from a place of hard-won understanding. "They're just defining what's acceptable, what you'll participate in, and what you won't." The grateful surprise in her eyes felt like purpose. I checked my laptop one last time before heading to the airport. An email had just arrived. The sender was Josephine P. The subject? "Thought you might like to know." My heart skipped. I opened it. "Amelia, I hope you're well. After the wedding, I sent that file to Mr. Hamilton Sr. anonymously. Turns out they hired a forensic accountant. They found everything, the fake invoices, the hidden accounts, all of it. I'm testifying next week. Pierce Hamilton filed for an annulment based on fraud. It's quiet for now, but it's happening. I just thought you should know. You deserved better. All the best, Wokoworsins. Josephine." I closed the laptop, a slow, quiet smile spreading across my face. I hadn't needed the bomb, but justice had found its mark anyway. A year later, Beckett and I stood on my balcony. His arm was around my waist as we watched the city lights. The small velvet box from dinner sat open on the coffee table. Inside, an emerald-cut emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I had it custom made," he'd said at the restaurant, "because green is your color," despite what anyone else says. "Did you see Serafina's card arrived?" he asked, nodding toward the envelope propped against a vase. Her congratulations had been brief, stilted, and lacked any of her usual barbs. It was almost normal. She was in therapy, according to my mother. The annulment had been a brutal public shock. 70 guests, just like we planned? Beckett asked, changing the subject to our own vineyard wedding next spring. 70 guests, I confirmed. I turned in his arms, facing the question I knew was coming. Should we invite Serafina? The night air carried the scent of rain and possibility. I thought of the woman who had tried so hard to humiliate me, and the woman I had become in spite of her. Yes, I answered. Beckett kissed my forehead, understanding. Yes, I said again, not because I've forgotten, but because I've grown. Her presence doesn't threaten me anymore. My sister once tried to make me feel small, I said, looking out at the glittering city. She only succeeded in showing me how big my life could be without her approval. Inside, I slipped off my heels and padded barefoot across the cool hardwood, no longer running from anything. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.